So, Todd, if you would just kind of tell us a little bit about esports and for some of our audience kind of who doesn't necessarily know exactly what esports entail.
Yeah, good question. So esports, short version is it's games played at a competitive level, often in front of spectators. So games is a spectator sport. And as you know, I guess even going back to arcade days, these machines behind us, there's always an innate nature to compete when skill is involved. It's just a human drive. So when I was growing up, it was Casey's Arcade. I would walk there, and the way I would compete was the leaderboard on the screen. So you get to put your 3 initials up there, and that's what you'd have. But these days, it's quite a bit different, right? I mean, I don't know. What's your early competitive experience in gaming?
So I'm a little bit younger, 24, and so I grew up with the kind of local neighborhood. Everyone gathered around a 4-player console like an N64, Super Smash Brothers, and of course with the advent of the Xbox and PS2 and System Link, LAN parties were all the rage. So get a bunch of people together, one room, and this was before online services started taking the world by storm. So we didn't have the, being able to connect with anyone around the world instantly. So it was more localized and less score-based and more multiplayer competitive. 2 people or 4 people going at each other in real time.
Yeah, and I think kind of the third part is online, right? So it started 1 person, 1 machine, leaderboard, then multiple people, physical space, and then thank goodness the internet came along. So now you and I could play with or against each other, even though we're in different houses. And that's maybe chapter 3 of esports. And now we're in chapter 4, where other people can watch us play over platforms like Twitch and esports. And so now it's truly global.
I think the natural progression and evolution of video games as a medium and art form is kind of giving off this secondary effect, maybe this tangential effect where games have become very cinematic. The graphics are incredible, and a lot of the people in the artistic pipeline are those from film, and some of those skill sets are transferable, like 3D animation and modeling. And so some of these games, whereas back in the mid-2000s, to an untrained eye or a parent, they wouldn't necessarily know what was going on, now are a lot more visually and aesthetically pleasing, and it's almost like watching a TV show or a sport. And some people can just watch it for the pure enjoyment of how it looks in the action, regardless of the very high-level skills that are going on at the same time.
So you're saying me as a square dot in Adventure on the 2600 was not visually compelling?
Well, art is subjective. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about gaming is it's set up to let you experiment, because the consequence for failure is not all that bad, right? You're not going to break a bone, you're not going to get hurt. And so in the same way, I really see gaming as it's problem solving done in a fun way. And so, of course, when I looked at my own kids and how much gaming they were doing, a lot of it was around, well, what is this displacing? Like for us, it was always important to actually get some physical activity and run around outside. But a lot of what it was displacing was more passive consumption of watching TV and just sitting there. And at the end of the day, the number one thing that makes games different from every other form of media is you are the protagonist. It's agency. You make choices. That's what makes game different from everything else. And I think that's a great thing for young people to learn, agency.
Like an active mind is a learning mind, and I've been of that same belief that even being young and growing up with my family all huddled around the movie, I don't know if I was ADD or just loved games better, but I would never finish the movie. I'd go upstairs and play video games because I was always actively engaged in problem solving, basic skills, strategy, community, deal, with your friends and stuff like that. So there is a much more interactive sense, and that's really what a game is. It's that sense of interaction and sense of community as well.
Yeah.
As you mentioned.
So speaking of taking control of your destiny and agency, let's shift and talk just a bit about entrepreneurship, right? So you've been doing some projects recently. I've had some projects in my past. I don't know, what have you learned so far about the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, so I will say one thing, and to reference a personal hero of mine, Gabe Newell, is these things, they take time. And one thing, and that's also part of growing up as well, is I realize how long things take. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and you have to prepare, you have to plan, and you have to make sure that you have your definitions of what your mission is clearly defined and stick to them. So I've been developing video games, and I'm getting into publishing video games and helping fund them and things like that. So I've just realized it's important to, that also that old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know, also rings true as well. It's so important to get out there, and even though the virtual world is great, it is important to get out in the real world, go to networking events, connect to people, talk to people, take, random jobs here and there. If you're an entrepreneur, you do freelance, Of course, there's a line when you say no, to a job, but don't say no too often. Try to say yes to anything, just because it's all about opening doors. So for me, it's been kind of growing a lot of experience and, developing a wide knowledge portfolio, and that all helps. And sometimes in that journey, it may feel like what I'm doing doesn't have anything to do with my initial goal, but it really does. And it's helped me in my experience of developing video games and things like that, to have those experiences to pull from.
Our company Skillshot is really all about that. How can we deliver esports and gaming with positive impact on people's characters and make the world a little better?
Absolutely. So Georgia, there are some misconceptions about what we do here, but it's growing and it's rising as one of the most important and powerful places for esports and video game development and things like that. And esports is now getting into the school system, and I know you know a lot about this, so if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit on that.
Yeah, you're right, Ben. The other hat I wear when I'm not doing my day job is chair of something called the Atlanta Esports Alliance, and I think it shows the thought leadership of Georgia, because every major city has something like a sports commission or sports council. They try to win the Super Bowl, which we were fortunate enough to host in Atlanta, but this city and state actually is taking that to esports. So the Atlanta Esports Alliance is a division of the Sports Council. So in the same way we're talking to FIFA about bringing the World Cup here as part of North America, we're talking to, say, Riot Games about hosting the championship for League of Legends. And so, it kind of brings up false stereotypes about gaming and often about Georgia. I travel a lot globally, and I think people don't realize how much of a technology leader this state is. So of course, we're here talking to one another in the Computer Museum of America in Roswell, Georgia, and surrounded by really a collection of great items that preserve the history of computing. And but that's not the only way that this state is leading. So when it comes to esports, Georgia was one of the first 5 states in the nation to adopt gaming, playing video games, as an officially sanctioned high school sport. So, I don't know, did you earn a letter jacket in high school? You're a pretty big guy.
I did not. I played a little bit of football,
Okay.
but I had to ask my coach what a tackle was.
All right. So,
we did not grow up with sports at all in my household. It was all music and art and video games.
So you could earn, if you rewound a little bit, and this program was there, you could earn that jacket in 3 games. They're all content appropriate for teens. So right now it's League of Legends, it's Rocket League, and homegrown Smite from High Res Studios that are all really kind of friendly in terms of content and all emphasize teamwork. And I think what's been so interesting to see here in Georgia and really all over the nation is this has brought in a cohort of kids that would otherwise not have attachment with the school, and it's also resulted in better student outcomes. So for instance, we know kids are playing these games anyway, but they might be playing them at home, right, connected online. But the way these programs are run, you play them on campus, and so you're learning teamwork, you're learning mastery, communication, good sportsmanship, how to be a good winner, not a sore loser. And so all these sort of values that I know I wanted my kids to develop through traditional sports are now being delivered through esports, and they're reaching kids that would otherwise have no affiliation with the school. So now they're proud to play on behalf of their school. And in many cases, because there's a GPA average, they've actually got to bring up their in-school performance in order to play when otherwise they might have been disaffected. So That's amazing. And the other thing that's amazing is how accessible it is, right? It's not specific to gender, race, height. Anybody can play. And I know we had a story specific to Smite where I spoke to a young man who was so proud that he was able to play, and the school was actually doing really, really well and on their way to a state championship. And this young man, Daniel, was confined to a wheelchair. So he used the words life-changing because now he could take part in this activity, and kids were looking at him, you know, like they never had before, right? That kind of pride.
That is life-changing, and that is something that just is a testament of how progressive Georgia really is, and it levels the playing field. That's true diversity when you have, it's not just, you know, a certain group of people in a sport per se, but it's many different walks and paths of life, you know, people who are disenfranchised that aren't able to participate in a sport, you know, physically, you know, that have brilliant active minds. You know, I grew up with an uncle with severe cerebral palsy, and so I grew up in the nursing home feeding him and, you know, shaving him and giving haircuts and growing up around disability. And he had a brilliant mind, and he couldn't really talk either. He could formulate kind of emotions and noises, but he had a brilliant mind, and he would even help me with my math homework. Is this the answer, Stephen? And he would light up, and he was right, and he was a brilliant mind that was trapped in this body. And if I could only go back and put a VR headset on him so he could feel like what it would be like to fly, you know? And so you have a lot of brilliant minds that aren't able to participate in those mainstream sports, that this is just a gateway to a whole nother world of opportunity and possibility that allows for people, you know, on the spectrum or disabled, you know, to be able to play and participate and compete and have these life-changing experiences.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that brings up is you use the term gateway, right, is of course there could be physical limitations, or there could be just a degree of lack of access, right? I mean, this is the national conversation these days, right, is how do we make sure we're expanding that? And so one of the things that also happened here in Georgia a couple years ago when we did host the Super Bowl, our company was fortunate to partner with Steve Young, Jerry Rice. For younger kids, they may not know, they're really, really good at football. And they were here, and ahead of the Super Bowl, we worked with them to open up in downtown Atlanta, just a block from the state capitol, an esports STEM center. So public school kids who might not have access to the internet or a great computer at home could visit that and practice esports for free, and also get exposed to STEM, right? So centers like that, where video games get you in the door, but then you get exposed to the whole world of computing and computer programming and graphic design and production. So these sort of centers, like where we are, surrounded by, you know, these amazing computing devices, they tend to inspire young minds no matter where they come from. And so that's another reason I'm an esports evangelist, is because I see that those things lead to good jobs in the future, and we want those opportunities to be available to the broadest group possible.
It was fantastic talking with you today. Thank you for joining us at the Computer Museum of America in Roswell, Georgia. You know, we are preserving history here and opening opportunities for you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. You can find me, Todd Allen Harris, on the Twitters, on the LinkedIns. So yeah, learn about esports, and let's conquer the world together.